I'm going to tell you a story that started actually in November 2005, so it's actually 15 years ago this month. And I was persuaded by my wife to go to the Hay Festival to listen to a debate on climate change, where Sir David King and Lord Oxburgh of Shell were talking about what industry could do and what the government could do. But at the end of it, they addressed this massive audience and said, well, we've told you what we're going to do, but what are you all going to do? You know, we're all in this together. What are you going to do when you leave this conference? So I went out thinking this is quite interesting, but what on earth could an individual do? And then a few months later, I had this strange idea that maybe the community where I've lived for 35 years in Ashton Hayes could become England's first carbon neutral village. So before I tell you the story, I'll say this is where Ashton Hayes is, basically between Manchester and Liverpool. And it's a very nice village. It's a typical overview of it. Pub, church, school, primary school, that sort of thing. Typical sort of Ambridge village. And my view was maybe we could try, if you couldn't persuade a community to become carbon neutral in a village as nice as this, how would you do it in an area of Brighton or anything like that, London? So what I did was I decided I'd give it a go. And I was just a citizen in the village. And I just wanted to give you a feel of the village, if this will work. Sorry. Sorry. There we go. That's just an overview of village, which was done by a French TV crew who came later on. This is quite a few years ago. A few solar panels you can see there. So that's just to get the flavour. So, what do you do when you suddenly think, I've got an idea, will my community think I'm crazy? Well, the first thing you do is you go to the pub. And you say, you go to see your friends in the pub and say, go to the quiz night, it's a good idea. And go to your quiz team and say, I have an idea, what do you think? And I said, do you think we could attempt to become England's first carbon neutral community? And I thought they'd all start laughing, but they actually all said, oh, that's an interesting idea. And a friend of mine who is in the group, Professor Alexander from the geography department at Chester University, he said, if you can get this going, I'll get the university involved to do some carbon footprinting. But I didn't like the idea of just a bunch of us standing up and saying something. I wanted it to be democratic, this project. So as a citizen, I asked the Parish Council if I could have a 10-minute talk to them at the next meeting, which was November 15 years ago. And I wanted to talk. I didn't tell them what it was about. I just said I want to have a right to 10-minute speech as a member of the public. So I went to Ashton Hayes Parish Council. We've highlighted subsequently. And I just stood up and I said I was quite concerned about climate change and what about us doing something about it. And they were totally surprised because normally I'm asking about street lighting or potholes or something like that. And they listened to it and I explained what the idea might be to persuade the community, but it would be a democratically owned project. So they asked me to go out of the room and they voted on it. And when I came back, they said, we've voted on it and we've agreed to onboard this project into the Parish Council on 3 or 4 conditions. One was I took up the vacant seat on the Parish Council. Because I think they thought. The second one was that we never spend any of the Parish Council's money, ever. And the third one was that I promised to run it for 5 years. And that was the condition that I accepted. So, and the fourth one they just added at the end was, and by the way, there's only a few of us in this meeting. What about proving to us the public will like this idea? Because we're not sure they will. So within a month, you have to prove to us that the public will like the idea. So I went away and I thought about this, and I thought, what are we trying to do? And we were trying to do something about climate change, to be the first community. And the general feeling was at that time that people wanted the children and future generations to know we tried to do something and that we just didn't ignore it. And so when the kids and grandkids ask us, we go, well, we had a go. So, but how do you start, when you've no money, how do you start a meeting and get people to it? So I went to primary school and I asked them if we could use the room for free. I then rang round with everybody I could think of who owned a business locally. All the directors of all these businesses. And within 2 days, I had cheques for £3,600 because they all wanted to help. They all wanted to do something. The staff wanted to do something. And they not only gave us money, but they gave us equipment like exhibition posters and that sort of thing. which was really interesting. And some of these sponsors, like RSK, it's the company I now work for, is actually been sponsoring us for 15 years. So what you do then, you get some money, and then you decide that you've got to get people engaged, so you needed some signage. So with some of that money we got, we've made some signs. And this is my friend, Professor Alexander. And one foggy Sunday morning, we put this sign up underneath the main road sign. And people wondered what's going on. But it made people think, oh, something's going on. This was prior to the meeting. And then we got the kids involved. We had the children at primary school. We thought, the difficulty with climate change, you can't see carbon, you can't see carbon dioxide, you can't see it. So we had the children do a display of how they saw the future of vehicles at the school. And we said, on our evening when we're going to announce this to the public, we're going to have the children there talking about their vehicles. And that's brilliant, because when you get kids involved in a primary school for a Thursday evening meeting, you drag the parents and grandparents and brothers and sisters to the meeting. So you get an automatic audience of about 50 people. So we thought we might get about 50 people. And that woman in the red coat, she'd heard about it from BBC Northwest, and she came to film the children and just talk about what they were doing. This is the first meeting with the public. It was -2, and that's half the audience. There were so many people came along that we had to put them all in the classrooms so they could be occupied until we did the show a second time. And one of the reasons we got them there is with some of that money from businesses, we said, do you mind if we spend it on English champagne? Because it's one of the things that's really improving with climate change. So we bought some chapel down, and we gave champagne to all the parents, and the particular ones who were waiting, they got more champagne. And the kids got apple pie from the Women's Institute. So the Parish Council leader there was just announcing what we were doing. The reason it's only half the people is because we were exceeding the health and safety capacity of the hall. And then there's a chap there with a microphone you can just see. And he didn't tell us he was coming, but it turned out he was recording it and broadcasting it to 12 million people on the World Service. So suddenly we were getting all these emails from around the world saying, I've just heard about your village on the World Service, which was great. And at that meeting, we said to people, we don't want you to spend any money. The University of Chester is going to spend 2 months in the village in May, and we're going to do our baseline carbon footprint. So don't do anything until after May, because we'll get the measurement. So that was interesting. And then we had some rules. People shouted from the audience, well, we're doing this, but what are the rules? And so we came up with these rules. We do not allow politicians to address us. That was a key thing politically, because if you start getting politicians from one persuasion or the other, you alienate part of the society. So we said, no politicians can address us. They can come to the meeting and listen and ask questions, but they cannot address us. We also don't argue with anybody. So if somebody's got 15 outside heaters in the garden, we won't point the finger at them. We just don't argue with them. But what you find when you do that is if you argue, you alienate people. If you leave them alone, they'll gradually observe, and they'll change their behaviours. We also, Parish Council said wants to share everything freely. So we've done this voluntarily for 15 years, and everything's on our website that you can have, all the reports we can have. We've never used the money, and the other condition was we had to have lots of fun doing it, which made people enjoy it. On the politician front, I'll just tell you one quick story, because it was election time. And we had a Conservative MP, Cabinet Minister, who was our local Chester MP. And he rang up on the day of the meeting and said, oh, by the way, I'm coming tonight to open the meeting. And we said, no, you're not. And he said, yes, but I'm your MP, I'm entitled to. And my background is journalism, so I'm used to MPs being a bit hard-nosed. And I said, well, you can come, but you can't address it. No way. So they were furious. And anyway, they turned up with a huge satellite truck that they hadn't told us about. And he'd arranged a live broadcast for Granada Television from the meeting to show his carbon credentials. But he never got on because he sat in the audience the whole time. So we got the coverage, but he didn't get the coverage. OK, so what did we do? As I say, I'm a scientist also by background, and all of us didn't want to do anything without measuring the impact of what we do. Everything we want to do, we want to measure it. So we had the university students do this carbon footprint. They spent 6 weeks in the village altogether, and another 6 weeks analysing the data. And they went door to door explaining to people what they were going on. And people could put signs on the door saying, don't come in, don't want to see you. Or they could go in and have a chat. And they ended up having lots of cups of tea with people and talking about what's going on. And you can't really see this, but this is our surveys that was developed by the University of Chester based on DEFRA calculations. So every house had its own assessment. And then 6 weeks later, they got a private assessment for their house about what they could do to reduce the carbon footprint, starting with the easiest and going to the latest. But we did say to them, please don't spend any money on solar panels until we change our behaviours. And it's the change in behaviour we really focused on. So how do you change behaviour? Well, you start to share information between neighbours and friends, because neighbours and friends are really powerful at exchanging stories. So you choose people who've really got into it, and you communicate and publicise throughout the community what they're doing. So everybody in the community knows Richard is an electrical engineer. And Richard decided he would measure the power use of all his home equipment. He just decided to do this. But he didn't have a DVD player and a VCR, so people were taking them around to his house. So for a while, he had his own DVD player and VCR. He really enjoyed it. And he published these figures. And people actually said they didn't realise the tumble dryer was so big in use and things like that. And it starts a conversation going. Then on the top right there, we had these meters, which we gave to the Scouts and the Cubs. And we said, go home and measure how much energy it takes to make a cup of tea and how much does your PlayStation use. And they were delighted to find that their PlayStation used 20 times less than a cup of tea, kind of thing, and they were talking about it. But one of the key things we wanted to do was we said we would share our information, and we were getting lots of people phoning us up saying, we like what you're doing. And particularly, we got the media phoning us up, because this was a time when, in 2005-06, climate change wasn't really on the agenda. Al Gore's film hadn't really got out. And we got calls from the media saying, we want to do a positive story about what's going on and about what we can all do. And so the first people who came were the local newspaper, Chester Chronicle. But I knew as a journalist that if you could get a story in the Chester Chronicle, all the other newspapers are parasites. They listen to what's in those newspapers and pick up the story. And then we got Channel 4. And one of the things that was really interesting was the Financial Times. And they spent 3 days in the village, and they did a 5-page article on us, interviewing people and all the businesses that had supported us. So all those businesses who chipped in 50 quid or £100, whatever, they got mentioned in the Financial Times, and they couldn't believe this was happening. And subsequently, we got lots of people from around the world, New Zealand, Canada, Sky News. And that was very interesting. And most recently, we were on the front page of the New York Times, and I'll tell you a bit more about that story. So also, in 2007, we were asked we got a phone call saying, would you come to Wembley? It was the first day the new Wembley was open, and they said, it's the Live Earth Rock concert, and we'd like you to represent Britain at a Live Earth Rock concert.
Some people who have done it are the people of Ashton Hayes in Cheshire.
Oh, well done,
and
well done.
Some of them are over here. Hello. Now, you're Gary. It was your idea.
That's right.
Yes. You're Barry.
Yep.
You live in the village. You run the pub, is that right?
Yeah, landlord of the pub, yeah.
And Zach Goldsmith down the end there. Hello. The editor of The Ecologist. So how hard was it to convince the people of Ashton Hayes?
It was remarkably easy, actually. About last January, we held a meeting. We said, look, we're very concerned about climate change. Who's up for joining with us to try and make the village carbon neutral? And we had 75% of the adults turn out on a cold January night. And since then, we've just had more and more people, the kids, the local business, the local university helping us.
OK, well, there's a film of what you did, and here's a little clip.
If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise.
Even that bastion of Britishness, the local village pub, has gone green.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our quiz. Right, well, we'll start with the first round of questions. Question 1. How many plastic bags are used in the UK each year? Yeah, plastic carrier bags. Going to the nearest million.
They came to me and explained to me, do you want to be the first carbon neutral pub? And I said, I don't know what you're on about. What's this on about? What is this? But when we looked at it, we saved £200 a month on the first month we tried to look at something.
Question 8. What are the two main greenhouse gases?
bit strange now because people are talking about climate changes now. It's not talking about Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Everton, Chelsea, Tottenham and stuff like that. It's talking about how we can do something with this village, how we can change it.
And here's Barry with legs. What difference has it made in your life? Is it annoying, kind of, you know, resetting digital clocks all the time and turning off everything?
No, it's quite easy, really. I mean, Garry came to you, I was a bit sceptic. I thought, oh, I can be bothered with this, you know, it's one of these things. But what happened was the University of Chester came and helped me for the day, and just by turning stuff off.
Listen, I'm going to interrupt you. We're going to come back and talk about this some more with Zach. But for right now, Black Eyed Peas are on the stage.
So then we gave evidence to the House of Commons. This is an official House of Commons. We were in Hansard and we helped to write the community energy plan for DEC. So we continued this for surveys. In the first year, we saved 20% straight away, piece of cake with behaviour change. Absolutely no trouble, 20%. After 3 years, we got to 23%, and then the community said, can we start investing? So then we started to install solar renewables and that sort of thing. We also got a lot of money for what we were doing, and we actually got nearly £750,000 in that first 5 or 6 years. We won, a local student won a big film award for Beat the BBC and various other people, and we just generally got, DEFRA gave us a very useful grant, I can tell you about later, and so that was fine. And then we got this 400,000 to build our own power generating system. It did work, but I'm not going to dwell on this. Can I have just a couple more minutes? Is that all right? I'm rushing through this, but basically we got this DEC Low Carbon Communities grant of 410,000. And we were delighted. We were lucky to get it. Only 20 communities got it. And then there's an election, and the Conservatives got in and said, we've won the election, there's a moratorium on spending your money. So we said, well, OK, but said, we'll let you know in 6 months, he said. So in 6 months, they said, oh, we're very pleased. You can have your 410,000 for your project. So we said, well, can we actually have another year to do it? Because that was the time frame. Oh, no, you have to spend it by the end of February or you can't have the money. So we said, well, we can't build this, but can we build a pavilion, a low-carbon pavilion on our new recreation field? And they said, well, OK, you can do, so long as you would get the sign-off that it's completed in February. So this is September, right? We haven't got plans for it. So we got to Chester Council and said, can we build that building? Will you give us quick planning permission? They said, no, we can't possibly do that. So we said, OK, we're building it anyway. So we went and built it without planning permission. And we said, take us to court because it'd be the most fantastic story we would get in the news, you know? And we got planning permission for it. So we've put panels on the school roof. The school's now net carbon zero. We formed an energy company. The school is now carbon negative for most of summer. We started off just thinking, what can we do in our own sphere? But we shared it and we communicated it. And then we had people from all over the world. And we made a toolkit. And now there's communities which are exact mirror image of Ashton Hayes in northern Canada. There's communities in New Zealand. There's communities in Castlemaine in Australia who are doing it. And we're in constant contact. And it's made the public feel very proud of being there. And now, what we're doing is, since then, there's this confidence coming in the community. We've got together and we now own the community shop and run it. Actually, Plunkett Foundation was really helpful with that. And that's put an award. The community cafe in the pavilion encourages a particular place for old people to go. And the recreation won awards. And so now we're trying to buy the pub. But these are people from around the world. This journalist from the New York Times came for 3 days with a National Geographic photographer. She interviewed everybody in the village. She was lovely. Then when she left, we discovered she was John F. Kennedy's granddaughter. And everybody in the village couldn't believe that. She'd come to see us. People use a shop. People think more about the personal impact. People are proud of the village, most of them. And this is I'll end on this because it's 2 residents who lived through the whole thing.
I'm Yvette Owen. I was in the first film 10 years ago. I believe that a lot has changed in Ashton since the community started on the eco project. it certainly brought organisations together to work as a community, and it's been a really positive influence on people within the village. Grace was at Ashton Primary School when the first film came out. She was 7 at the time. What can you remember about it, Grace?
I remember the cameras coming to the school. A lot of my experience of the project was through the primary school. And also I did a project with the brownies as well, so it affected a lot of the community. And I got a Green Blue Peter badge with the brownies. I think the project's really good because it's affected this community and it's also influenced others.
Okay, so things didn't work. Again, you have this presentation, you can read the slides. One thing that somebody mentioned earlier was a neighbourhood plan. And we worked really hard with Chester City Council, and we now have a neighbourhood plan completed and approved, which is the first one they say, which has a renewable energy section where they guarantee that we can have land set aside for renewables or offsetting, that sort of thing. And that's in our neighbourhood plan, which we're very proud of getting with that. So next steps, community pub, pubs for sale, and there's a website there with all this on. And if you want to come and ask me questions, there's so many things I could tell you, but in 15 years in 20 minutes is a bit short, okay? So thank you very much.